The sacred sword slid from its crystal stand as easily as if it had been waiting for Maya's touch for 10,000 years. The moment her small hand closed around the hilt, the weapon seemed to adjust itself to fit her perfectly, becoming lighter and more balanced than should have been possible for something so large. The brilliant light that erupted from the monument was visible across the entire planet. Every Xerian on the surface stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the Philosopher's stand, where beams of radiance pierced the purple sky like captured starlight in the observation chamber. The assembled Xerians stood in complete silence. Their patterns had gone completely dark, something Maya had never seen before, and which her parents would later learn meant absolute shock. High Counselor Zethka's 3 eyes were wide, his usual composure completely shattered. This is not possible, he whispered through the translator. His voice barely audible, the elderly Xerian who had suggested the test was trembling, his patterns flickering between colors so rapidly that he looked like he was having some kind of seizure. In 10,000 years, no one? Not even the greatest philosophers. Through the communication device clipped to her shirt, Maya could hear her father's voice. Maya, are you all right in there? I'm fine, Dad. Maya called back, her voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. The sword in her hand felt warm and somehow alive, as if it contained a star that had been sleeping and was now gently waking up. Around her, the shadow figures she had helped during her journey to the center had become fully solid and real. They were beings from dozens of different species, some that looked almost human, others that were completely alien, and some that seemed to be made of pure energy or crystallized thought. All of them were smiling at her with whatever passed for smiles in their species. You did it, said one of them, a being that looked like it was made of flowing water. You understood what the others could not. What we could not, said another, this one resembling a tree with eyes. For we are not shadow figures, young wisdom bearer. We are the previous challengers who became lost in their own certainty, trapped here until someone could show us the true path. Maya gasped. You mean, all of you tried to claim the sword? Over the centuries, yes, said a third figure, tall and crystalline like the Xerians, but somehow different. We came seeking to prove our wisdom, to claim the sword as a trophy of our understanding. But wisdom cannot be claimed. It can only be shared. The water being gestured toward the brilliant light that surrounded them. By helping us instead of ignoring us, by choosing to serve rather than to conquer, you have freed us all. We can return to our lives and our worlds, carrying with us the lesson you have taught. One by one, the freed beings began to fade away, but they were not disappearing, they were returning. Maya realized to whatever times and places they had come from. Each one paused to thank her before leaving. Remember, said the last one, a being of pure light that hurt to look at directly, the sword is not your possession. It is your responsibility. Use it wisely. And then Maya was alone in the chamber with the sacred sword, as the brilliant light gradually dimmed to a warm, steady glow. She heard new sounds from outside, the approach of many footsteps, urgent voices, and what sounded like organized chaos. The chamber began to shift around her, platforms lowering and bridges extending until they formed a solid pathway leading back to the entrance. Maya walked slowly along this path, still amazed by how perfectly the sword fit in her hand. When she emerged from the Philosopher's stand, she found herself facing not just the original group of Xerians and her parents, but what appeared to be half the population of the diplomatic quarter. Word of the light display had spread rapidly, and everyone had come to see what had happened. Her parents rushed forward immediately, her mother sweeping her into a tight hug while her father examined her carefully for any signs of harm. Are you hurt? Dr. Sarah asked anxiously. What happened in there? The entire building lit up like a star? I'm okay, Mom, Maya said, though she realized she was exhausted in a way she had never experienced before. But I think we need to talk to the Xerians. High Counselor Zethka approached slowly, his patterns now showing deep purple mixed with silver, colors Maya had learned indicated profound respect and humility. When he reached speaking distance, he did something that shocked everyone present. He knelt down to bring himself to Maya's eye level. "Sacred bearer," he said, his voice completely different from the patronizing tone he had used before. "I will have made a grave error in judgment?" Maya shifted uncomfortably. Being called sacred bearer felt wrong, especially by someone who just hours before had been treating her like an amusing pet. "It's okay," she said. "You didn't know. But maybe you could just call me Maya?" Zethka's patterns shifted to show confusion. "But you are the bearer of the sacred sword. You have achieved what our greatest philosophers could not accomplish in millennia. You have proven yourself worthy of the highest honors our civilization can bestow." "I don't want honors," Maya said firmly. "And I don't think that's what the sword is for." She held up the crystalline blade, which seemed to respond to her words by glowing more brightly. "In there, I learned that wisdom isn't about being better than other people. It's about helping other people be better." The young Zarian Vexnoth stepped forward. His patterns were cycling through rapid changes that Maya couldn't interpret, but his voice sounded amazed. "Maya, how did you know what to do?" "Our philosophers have studied the challenge of the sacred sword for generations. They developed elaborate theories about the nature of wisdom and the requirements for worthiness." Maya thought for a moment. Maybe that was the problem? They were thinking too hard about what wisdom was supposed to look like instead of just ... being wise. An older Zarian in the crowd spoke up. "But how can a mere child understand concepts that have puzzled our greatest minds?" Before Maya could answer, her father stepped forward. "Maybe that's exactly the point," Dr. Chun said quietly. "You've been assuming that wisdom comes from age and study. But what if it comes from approaching problems with an open mind and a caring heart?" "Humans don't live as long as your people," Dr. Sarah added. "We can't spend centuries thinking about problems. We have to learn to see clearly and act quickly. Maybe that gives us a different perspective." High Counselor Zethka stood slowly, his patterns now showing what Maya was beginning to recognize as deep thought. "You suggest that our very longevity, which we have always considered an advantage, may have blinded us to certain truths." "Not blinded," Maya said gently. "Just made you look in a different direction. Like if you're trying to see something far away, you might miss what's right in front of you." The crowd of Zirians began to murmur among themselves, their patterns flickering in complex discussions. Maya caught fragments of the translated conversation. "Never considered ... the value of a fresh perspective ... what else have we overlooked ... An ancient Zarian pushed through the crowd, his patterns so deep purple they were almost black with age. "I am Chief Philosopher Kethlon," he announced. "I have studied at the Philosopher's Stand for 700 years, seeking to understand its mysteries. Young human ... would you consent to teach us what you have learned?" Maya blinked in surprise. "Teach you? But you're all so much smarter than me. You know about quantum mechanics and philosophy and stuff I've never even heard of." "Intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing," Kethlon said humbly. "We have intelligence in abundance. But wisdom? True wisdom seems to have eluded us." Maya looked at the sacred sword in her hand, then at the crowd of beings who were waiting for her answer. She thought about the shadow figures in the monument who had been trapped by their own certainty, and about how helping them had been more important than reaching her goal. "I don't think I can teach you wisdom," she said finally. "But maybe we can learn it together. That's what friends do, right? They help each other figure things out." The word friends seemed to hit the assembled Zirians like a physical force. Their patterns all shifted simultaneously. To show surprise and something that might have been hope, Vexnoth stepped forward again. "You would consider us friends? Even after how we treated you?" Maya shrugged. "You were wrong about humans, but you weren't trying to be mean. You just didn't understand us yet, and now you're willing to learn. That seems pretty friendly to me." Over the next several hours, as news of Maya's success spread across the planet and then throughout the Zirian Empire, everything changed. The dismissive attitude toward humans evaporated almost overnight. Replaced by intense curiosity and respect, scientists arrived to study how a human child had succeeded where their greatest philosophers had failed. Diplomats came to renegotiate the terms of the cultural exchange. Artists wanted to create works celebrating the moment when wisdom was redefined by a 9-year-old from Earth, but Maya found herself most interested in talking with ordinary Xerians, students like Vexnoth, workers from the Crystal Gardens, families with children who were curious about the strange little alien who had changed their world. As she sat in the diplomatic quarters that evening, the sacred sword resting across her lap while she ate dinner with her parents, Maya reflected on the day's The entrance to the philosopher's stand opened without sound, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. Maya stepped forward, but High Counselor Zefka raised a long arm to stop her. "There are protocols that must be observed," he said, his 3 eyes gleaming with anticipation. "The challenge of the sacred sword is not undertaken lightly. You must enter alone, but your progress will be monitored through the observation crystals." He gestured to several floating crystal screens that had emerged from the walls of the monument. Maya could see her own reflection in them, small and human among the towering Xerians. "The path to the sacred sword contains 3 chambers," Zethka continued, clearly enjoying his role as guide to what he expected would be the child's humiliation. "Each chamber tests a different aspect of philosophical understanding. The first examines your grasp of logical reasoning. The second tests your understanding of universal truth. The third reveals whether you possess genuine wisdom." Maya nodded seriously, though she wasn't entirely sure what the difference was between universal truth and genuine wisdom. "What happens if I get stuck?" "Simply call out and we will retrieve you," Zefka said. "There is no shame in admitting your limitations." Several Xerians made the clicking sound again, and Maya caught fragments of their translated comments. "How long before she gives up?" "I predict she won't make it past the first chamber." "This will teach the humans about their proper place." Maya's father squeezed her shoulder. "Remember, sweetheart, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about learning." "I know, Dad," Maya said, but her jaw was set in a determined line that her parents recognized. Once Maya made up her mind about something, she could be remarkably stubborn. Dr. Sarah handed her daughter a small communication device. "Just in case you need us." Maya clipped it to her shirt and walked toward the entrance. The moment she crossed the threshold, the dark material of the walls began to glow with soft, pulsing light. The corridor stretched ahead of her, lined with symbols that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. Behind her, she could hear the Xerians settling in to watch the show. Their patterns were flickering with what she now recognized as anticipation and amusement. The first chamber appeared after what felt like a long walk, but might have been only minutes. Time seemed strange inside the monument. The room was circular, with a dome ceiling that showed swirling patterns of stars. In the center stood a pedestal holding a complex geometric puzzle made of the same light-absorbing material as the walls. As Maya approached, words appeared in the air above the puzzle, glowing softly. "To proceed, arrange the pieces to show the logical relationship between existence, consciousness, and reality." Maya studied the puzzle pieces. They were strange shapes that seemed 3-dimensional, but somehow existed in more dimensions than her eyes could properly process. When she tried to pick up one piece, her hand passed through it. When she concentrated and tried again, she could feel its weight and texture. "Interesting," she murmured. "They exist when I pay attention to them." She spent several minutes just practicing picking up and moving the pieces, getting used to how they responded to her focused attention. Through the observation crystals, she could hear the Xerians commenting on her slow progress. "She doesn't even understand the basic mechanics of the puzzle," said one voice. "I told you this was pointless," said another. "Human minds simply aren't developed enough for this level of abstraction." Maya tried to ignore the voices and focus on the puzzle itself. The pieces were beautiful, with surfaces that showed depth and complexity the longer she looked at them. She began to notice that they weren't random shapes, but rather seemed to represent concepts made physical One piece felt like the concept of being solid, fundamental, unchanging. Another felt like thinking, fluid, active, constantly moving. A third felt like experiencing, connecting the other two, but somehow dependent on both. "Oh," Maya said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. "It's not about arranging them in space. It's about understanding how they relate to each other." She picked up the being piece and held it steady in the center. This represented existence, the fact that things are. Then she took the thinking piece and discovered she could make it orbit around the first one. Consciousness needed something to be conscious of, but what about reality? She picked up that piece and found it was different. It seemed to exist both around and within the other pieces simultaneously. Reality wasn't separate from existence and consciousness. It was the framework that allowed them to interact. As soon as she understood this relationship, the pieces began to glow and arrange themselves automatically, forming a complex, slowly rotating structure that was beautiful in its elegance. "The first chamber recognizes your understanding," said a voice that seemed to come from the monument itself. "You may proceed." Maya heard surprise clicking from the observation crystals, but she was already walking toward the passage that had opened on the far side of the chamber. The second chamber was larger than the first, with walls that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. In the center was what looked like a tree, but instead of leaves, its branches held floating symbols, equations, and images that Maya somehow understood represented different cultures, species, and ways of thinking from across the galaxy. Above the tree, words appeared: "Truth is claimed by all, yet understood by few. Show the universal truth that transcends all perspectives." Maya walked around the tree, studying the different symbols. She could see mathematical equations from human science, philosophical concepts from Zarian culture, artistic expressions from species she didn't recognize, and what looked like emotional or spiritual ideas represented in ways her mind could barely grasp. "Each branch thinks its truth is the only truth," she said aloud, working through the problem. "But they're all branches of the same tree." She reached toward the trunk of the tree and found she could touch it. The moment her hand made contact, she felt a rush of understanding. Every symbol on the branches was a different way of describing the same underlying reality. The mathematical equations, the philosophical concepts, the artistic expressions, they were all attempts by different minds to understand and describe the same universal patterns. "Truth isn't what you believe," Maya said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Truth is what connects everything, even when it looks different from different perspectives." The tree began to glow, and all the symbols on its branches started to pulse in synchrony, showing the hidden connections between them. Maya watched in wonder as the display revealed how concepts that seemed completely different were actually describing the same fundamental relationships from different viewpoints. "The second chamber acknowledges your insight," the voice said. "The final chamber awaits." The clicking sounds from the observation crystals had become much quieter, and Maya caught fragments of worried conversation. "How is she?" "This should not be possible. Perhaps we underestimated." Maya smiled to herself as she walked toward the third chamber. The aliens were starting to realize that maybe humans weren't as primitive as they had assumed. The final chamber took her breath away. It was vast, with no visible walls or ceiling, filled with floating platforms connected by bridges of pure thought. At the center, on a platform that seemed impossibly far away, stood a crystal pedestal. Even from this distance, Maya could see the sacred sword resting in its stand, glowing with inner light, but the path to reach it was complex. The floating platforms moved constantly, and the bridges between them flickered in and out of existence. Above it all, words appeared: "Wisdom is not knowledge, nor understanding, nor even truth." What is wisdom? Maya studied the shifting maze of platforms and bridges. She could see that timing would be crucial. She would need to jump from platform to platform, using the bridges when they appeared to reach the center. But even as she watched, she realized the pattern was constantly changing. There was no way to memorize a route. "It's not about finding the right path," she said slowly. It's about understanding what wisdom actually is. She sat down on the edge of the platform where she had entered and thought carefully. The first chamber had tested logical reasoning, understanding how concepts related to each other. The second had tested understanding of universal truth, seeing the connections between different perspectives. But what was wisdom? Through the observation crystals? She could hear the Xerians growing impatient. She's just sitting there. I knew she would give up eventually. No human could possess true wisdom. Maya ignored them and continued thinking. Knowledge was facts. Understanding was seeing how facts connected. Truth was the underlying reality that facts described. But wisdom is knowing what to do with understanding, she said aloud. It's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing what matters. As soon as she spoke these words, something changed in the chamber. The frantically moving platforms slowed their dance, and Maya began to see a pattern. But it wasn't a pattern in their movement. It was a pattern in their purpose. The platforms weren't obstacles to overcome. They were opportunities to help. On each platform stood a figure that Maya hadn't noticed before, shadowy representations of beings in need. One looked lost and confused. Another seemed angry, The transport ship hummed quietly as it moved through space toward the planet Xerian Prime, inside the passenger section. 9-year-old Maya Chun pressed her face against the small window, watching the stars blur past. Her dark eyes sparkled with curiosity as she tried to count the distant suns. Maya. Sit properly, her father said gently from the seat beside her. Dr. James Chun was part of the human diplomatic mission to establish trade relations with the Xerian Empire. As one of Earth's top xenobiologists, he had been chosen to help study alien life forms and build bridges between species. Maya's mother, Dr. Sarah Chun, looked up from her datapad where she was reviewing notes about Xerian culture. Remember what we discussed, sweetheart? The Xerians are very different from humans. They value logic and ancient wisdom above all else. They might not understand human children very well. Maya nodded, though she was more interested in the approaching planet than her parents' warnings. Through the window, Xerian Prime looked like a giant purple marble with silver rings around it. Strange floating cities dotted the surface. Connected by bridges of light that sparkled like diamonds, the ship docked at the main spaceport, which was a massive crystal structure that seemed to grow from the planet's surface like a mountain. As the Chun family stepped off the transport, Maya gasped at the sight of her first real aliens. The Xerians were tall, thin beings with blue-gray skin that shimmered slightly under the artificial lights. They had large, oval-shaped heads with 3 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern. Their limbs were longer than human proportions, and they moved with a grace that seemed almost like floating. Most striking of all were the intricate patterns that glowed softly beneath their skin, different for each individual like fingerprints. "Welcome to Xerian Prime," said the lead diplomat, whose name tag translated to High Counselor Zethka. His voice came through a translator device that made it sound hollow and echoing. "I am pleased to meet the human delegation." Dr. Chun stepped forward and bowed respectfully as they had practiced. "Thank you for welcoming us, High Counselor. I am Dr. James Chun, and this is my wife, Dr. Sarah Chun. We are honored to be here." Zethka's 3 eyes focused on Maya, who was staring openly at his glowing skin patterns. "And this small one?" "Our daughter Maya," Dr. Chun said proudly. "She was very excited to meet your people." Maya waved enthusiastically. "Hi, your skin is really pretty. Does it hurt when it glows like that?" Several Xerians nearby made a sound that the translator rendered as clicking, but Maya could tell from their body language that they were amused, though not in a kind way. "The young human asks simple questions," Zethka observed. "This is expected from such an undeveloped mind." Maya's smile faltered slightly, but she was too curious to be discouraged. "Undeveloped? But I can read 6 languages and I know all about photosynthesis and quantum mechanics." More clicking sounds from the Xerians, louder this time. "The small one believes knowledge and wisdom are the same thing," said another alien. "How charmingly primitive." Dr. Chun put a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. Maya is quite gifted for her age. Human children develop differently than other species. Indeed, Zethka said, his tone suggesting this was not necessarily a good thing. Come, we will show you to your quarters and then begin the cultural exchange tomorrow. The Chen family was given rooms in the diplomatic quarter, which was beautiful but cold. Everything was made of the same crystal material as the spaceport, and the furniture seemed designed for the tall Xerians rather than human proportions. Maya had to climb onto her bed like it was a small mountain. That night, as her parents reviewed diplomatic protocols, Maya explored their quarters. She discovered that the walls were actually transparent from the inside, giving her a view of the city beyond. The Xerians moved through their crystal streets like tall, glowing ghosts. In the distance, she could see an enormous structure that looked different from all the others. "Gad, what's that big building over there?" she asked, pointing through the wall. Dr. Chun looked where she was pointing and consulted his datapad. According to this, it's called the Philosopher's Stand. It's some kind of ancient monument. Very important to Xerian culture, but they don't allow outsiders to visit it. Why not? It says here that it contains tests of wisdom and understanding that only true philosophers can pass. The Xerians believe it was built by their ancestors to identify worthy leaders. Maya pressed her face against the crystal wall, studying the distant structure. Even from far away, she could see it was massive, with spiraling towers and floating platforms connected by beams of light. Something about it called to her, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The next morning, the cultural exchange began in a large chamber filled with floating platforms at different heights. The Xerians had arranged various displays of their technology, art, and philosophical texts. Dr. Chun and Dr. Sarah were both busy taking notes and asking careful questions. Trying not to offend their host, Maya wandered through the displays, fascinated by everything she saw. The Xerian art seemed to be made of solidified light, shifting and changing as she watched. Their books were crystal tablets that projected information directly into her mind when she touched them. "Be careful, small human," said a young Xerian who approached her. His patterns glowed bright green, which Maya had learned meant he was roughly equivalent to a teenager. Those knowledge crystals contain advanced concepts. Your primitive mind might be damaged by trying to understand them. "I'm not primitive," Maya said politely but firmly. "And my name is Maya, not small human." The young Xerian made the clicking sound again. "I am called Vexnoth. I study at the Academy of Higher Thought. Tell me, Maya, what is the nature of existence?" Maya considered this seriously. "I think existence is like a really big story that everyone gets to help write. Every choice we make adds new pages." Vexnoth's patterns shifted to orange, indicating surprise. "That is not entirely without merit, but it is still a child's answer. What about the paradox of infinite regression? You mean like when you ask what caused that and then what caused that forever?" Maya thought for a moment. "Maybe some questions don't have endings because they're not supposed to. Maybe the asking is more important than the answering." This time, Vexnoth's patterns flickered through several colors rapidly. "You speak like you have studied philosophy, yet you are merely a youngling." "I read a lot," Maya said with a shrug. "And I like thinking about big questions." "Don't you?" Before Vexnoth could answer, High Counselor Zethka approached with Maya's parents. "Ah, I see the young human has met one of our students. Vexnoth, I trust you are not wasting your time with childish games." "Actually," Vexnoth said slowly, "the small one, Maya, asks interesting questions." Zethka's three eyes all focused on Maya, with what she was beginning to recognize as the Xerian equivalent of a patronizing look. Interesting for a primitive species, perhaps. But true wisdom requires centuries of study and contemplation. The human lifespan is far too brief for genuine philosophical understanding. "That's not fair," Maya said, her voice getting a little louder. "Just because we're young doesn't mean we can't understand important things. Sometimes being young helps you see things differently." Several other Xerians had gathered around to listen to the conversation. Their clicking sounds grew louder, and Maya could tell they were laughing at her. The small one believes youth is an advantage in wisdom, Zethka announced to the group. How amusing. Perhaps we could test this theory, suggested an elderly Zarian whose patterns glowed deep purple with age. The philosopher's stand has stood for 10,000 years, waiting for one worthy of the sacred sword. No Zarian has been able to claim it in living memory. If the human child believes age and experience are not necessary for wisdom, the suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Maya didn't fully understand what they were talking about, but she could feel the mockery in their words. Dr. Chun stepped forward quickly. Hi, Counselor, we don't wish to cause any offense or disturb your sacred sites. No offense would be taken, Zethka said smoothly. In fact, it might be educational for all of us. The child could learn the difference between childish confidence and true understanding. Maya looked up at her father, then at the gathered Zirians. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were using her as entertainment, like a pet trying to perform tricks. But something inside her, a stubborn spark that had always gotten her into trouble at school, flared up. What kind of test is it? She asked. Zitka's patterns shifted to what Maya was learning indicated amusement. The sacred sword of understanding rests in a crystal stand at the heart of the monument. It has been there since our ancestors placed it as a test of true philosophical wisdom. Many have tried to claim it. All have failed. What happens if someone can't do it? Nothing harmful, the elderly Zarian assured her. The sword simply will not move for one who lacks the necessary understanding. It is perfectly safe for those humble enough to admit their limitations. Maya felt her parents' worried looks but also sensed an opportunity. These aliens thought humans were primitive and simple. They were treating her like a curiosity rather than a person. Maybe it was time to show them that they didn't understand humans as well as they thought they did. Okay, she said clearly. I'll tee it.